Very good evening, and thank you for joining us. We normally discuss on this show matters of news and developments happening in India. Today, of course, all eyes are on Washington, D.C. in the United States when the inauguration of Joseph R. Biden Jr. as the 46th President of the United States is scheduled to take place. In fact, there are some live visuals already coming in of that setup beginning. It's going to happen in a couple of hours. Donald Trump has just exited the White House for the last time. He will not be, in a break from tradition, he will not be attending the inauguration or welcoming the Bidens into the White House or showing them around, which is tradition in the United States. But there are going to be obviously big changes that come with the change of this administration. A lot of repair work needs to be done to the systems, the institutions within the country, and of course, for people around the world who are now watching to see how this will impact foreign policy, how this will impact the way, the manner in which America deals with the world, how America deals with China, with Russia. And for those of us in India, we're watching for some very specific things. One of those things is, as we've been told, a comprehensive immigration bill that's going to be sent to Congress almost immediately after this inauguration is over, to help us understand all of the things that are changing and are likely to change in America over the next couple of years. Meenakshi Ahamed, who is an author who's written a book called A Matter of Trust, India-US Relations from Truman to Trump. Ms. Ahamed, good evening and good morning to you. And thank you for joining us and making time for us here in India. Big day, obviously, in the US is, to begin with, we understand there's a lot of security in Washington and they're taking all precautions to make sure there are no rioters who come back. Is that true?
Yes, I went for a 7-mile walk through all the monuments yesterday and the day before, and basically it's in complete lockdown. It's chain link fences everywhere. The bridges are closed. You can't get anywhere. And right by where the Capitol is, where the inauguration is taking place this morning, the chain link fences are so small, the little holes, to prevent any bullets from going through. So you can barely actually see the Capitol through them. There's just military tanks, police everywhere. Streets are barricaded by everything from dump trucks to military tanks. So when you talk about a peaceful transition, it doesn't seem very peaceful, because this is sort of what you'd expect to find in Baghdad, where a government's taking over under armed guard. So, but anyway, we hope that now that Trump has left, that things go back to somewhat, normal. The grown-ups are back in charge, and let's hope that some normalcy and decency return.
Well, that normalcy has a lot of work to do. Listed out, obviously, through the campaign and even after that, are all the things that need to be done, from the pandemic and the economy, which President-elect Biden has pointed out will need the most attention, to also what's going on with China and the rest of the world. But looking at it from India's point of view, which is also the subject of your book, how much work needs to be done right now in foreign policy?
Well, so this is a very interesting question. As you know, Trump's attitude was bilateral. All his attitude towards countries was a bilateral approach. He treated each country on an individual basis. Are you good for America or me? And what's our trade balance like? What are you doing for me? He shot through all the alliances that had been in place since World War II and that had kept the whole world safe. There had been no wars in Europe, if you remember, after the Cold War. And so, and everything from Kosovo and all the big things that had happened had been through an alliance, that had been a unified approach. So the first thing on their agenda is going to be to repair those alliances that Trump had wrecked. And I think that given that China is sort of challenging the US at every turn, and has become such a strong competitor, and I think that their view is that we have to approach China from a position of strength. And so to do that, we have to have our alliances intact. So I think the first order of business is going to be to repair their alliances, to make it strong, and to have a common approach to China.
Well, this was not actually on my list of questions, but it's popping up a lot. A lot of our viewers are simply asking if democracy has in this modern world of social media, in this modern world of people having opinions and being so divided on those opinions, is democracy becoming weaker? And I'm just curious to know what your response is to that.
I think that it did become weaker under Trump in the US. I think that this current lot that's going into the administration is a very idealistic bunch of people. And they really, truly, firmly believe in democratic values. I mean, everyone I've spoken to. And so they are going to do everything they can to restore the moral authority of what they believe in. And I think democracy is at its core. So I don't think,
yes.
I think they see that it's been badly damaged. They recognize that, but they're going to do everything they can. There's going to be a summit. I think they recognize that the world is not in the mood to listen to America giving them a lecture on democracy. And I think, let's just look at history, since that's what my sort of background is. George Bush, second Bush, he was into, regime change and going in and, promoting democracy around the world and all that. And I think that sort of approach to the world is over. I think people recognize that, America's not in a position to go around promoting democracy given where they are right now. But I think restoring the moral authority of the US and promoting and sort of trying to convince the world that democracy is the right path is going to be front and center. Because here's the thing, they feel that China is going to be promoting a certain vision of leadership. And it's a sort of techno-authoritarian vision. And what they want to do is provide a competing vision of the world. And that is going to be a techno-democratic vision of the world. And I say techno because, as we all know, technology with Twitter and everything is dominating our lives. So they want to make sure that the vision that they provide the world is an attractive one. And they know that that's been damaged. So it is of absolute importance to them. And I think that if you saw the hearings yesterday, Tony Blinken's, confirmation hearings, and if you talk to Jake Sullivan or any of the top people in the cabinet, they are all committed to making sure that is at the core of their foreign policy.
If I may ask you about India specifically, obviously, where one of the things that most Indians in the US are going to find interesting and be watching out for is the immigration bill. We understand it will perhaps relax the cap on green cards and allow many people of Indian origin to get citizenship. Is that going to make a massive difference in numbers? Is that, the relationship with India? How are you reading that immigration bill right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally the whole they're going to ease off on immigration for sure. I mean, the immigration bill is going to be the first thing that's going to be on the agenda. I mean, that's what Biden has said. That's the first bill he's going to try and pass. Obviously, I think before the Indians, I think the DACA and sort of separation of families at the border, these things that really sullied the image of the Americans. That's going to be of primary importance. But I think, I mean, H-1B visas and all that is going to be very much on the cards. I think you can just judge by how many Indians Biden's brought into his administration, that he's pretty big on India. He's constantly joking when he was confirming Vanita Gupta in the Department of Justice. He turns around to Kamala and jokes, and he said, another, bright Indian from an immigrant family, sound familiar? I mean, he's always cracking jokes like that. So I think they're well. I think the Indians, it's almost like a little club now. Oh, these smart Indian guys. So they've become a recognized entity, and I think there's a really, certainly in the administration, quite a positive attitude towards the Indians. But whether that translates into a big expansion, now don't forget the H-1B visas. Let's say 10 years ago, 50% of them were going to Indians. It's now 75%. That's
Yes.
very high. So you also have to be a little concerned about backlash from other groups.
Also, since protecting the economy and sort of resurrecting the economy is one of his, primary goals as well, and securing jobs for Americans in America is also going to be something that he cares deeply about. Will that be a balancing act that he's going to have to find, the middle ground on?
Yeah, I think the economy is really hurting right now. But that's a lot of it due to COVID. Now, as they ramp up the immunizations and people develop some herd immunity, and and businesses start up again, hopefully that will recover, and with that, jobs. But I think that they will need something, some sort of big visionary project, and they're talking about infrastructure. But to do that sort of project requires congressional support. Let's see how Biden manages to get that.
And we have a question for you, if you don't mind. Aman Peshawari has asked a question on our chat window. He says, will there be a shift in foreign policy towards India now that the Democrats are in majority in the House, in the houses? Will they discuss things like the CA implementation? And given the fact that the support to Trump was given during the Howdy Modi event on a personal level between the two leaders, is that likely to affect? So there are three different questions here.
Say that it's really interesting, because if you read my book, a lot of it is about how personalities impacted the relationship. Yes, there's policy and there's a convergence of interests, but so much, I just looked at the history, so much of it was to do with how people got along with each other. I mean, Nehru and Truman just did not get along. And then, even Eisenhower, and, he sends his secretary, John Foster Dulles, and it's like they can't stand each other. And they have this complete difference, because, they think we chose non-alignment, and they thought you're either with us or against us. The world was black and white from the American point of view. And so India was in the black camp, because, we were non-aligned. And therefore, for them, if you were non-aligned, you were a communist. And Nehru just couldn't get that nuance through to them. And then Eisenhower meets Nehru, and they have this wonderful dinner in Gettysburg, and this rough rain is falling, and they have dinner in his home, and they get along, and all this sort of kind of anger and kind of tension dissolves. And after that, they sort of become friends. And Eisenhower comes to India, and it's like a wonderful, it's first president to come, and it's a fantastic visit. So, personalities have a lot to do with all this. And then you look at Mrs. Gandhi and Nixon. You see those tapes and the things that Nixon says about Indian women and Mrs. Gandhi, and all that antipathy. So yes, I think personalities have a lot to do with it. And there I'll say that Prime Minister Modi has been quite clever about, playing the Americans. He's figured out how to, he certainly figured out how to placate Donald Trump, right? Just look at the crowds he produced for him.
Yes, because everyone was arguing that that's what Donald Trump wanted. That's what he was looking for, and that's what was delivered to him. But since you have in your book looked at all of this, if we step back a little bit, consider the relationship that Dr. Manmohan Singh had with Barack Obama, that then Barack Obama had with Narendra Modi and Donald Trump, and this is now going to be Narendra Modi and Joe Biden. How has that relationship progressed? Because we haven't really seen any evidence of people who haven't gotten along.
I talk about this because, Jake Sullivan, who is now going to be the National Security Advisor, He's now, of course, cabinet person. I asked Jake, I said, Jake, how is it that, President Obama gets along with Manmohan Singh and also with Modi? And so, he hasn't, you'll have to read my book to see what the answer is, but there, because in a way, Obama and Manmohan Singh were similar people, right? They were academic, intellectual, sort of, quiet, thoughtful people. And then Modi is just so different. But he said Modi had a lot of energy and he came with a big mandate and he was all ready to sort of work with him on the climate deal. And he didn't, the whole sort of pro-Hindu thing, he didn't expose that side that much. And he really had a lot of energy, and Obama had that thing. He wanted this legacy on the climate deal. He wanted that signature deal, and Prime Minister Modi delivered. And so they really got on. They got on. They had a really working relationship.
What are your expectations now in the relationship between Joe Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
Well, if history has anything to teach us, I would say that, so far, Prime Minister Modi has been very astute and he's handled the US extremely well. I mean, you can't fault him for he hasn't made any missteps. So I expect that, he'll do the right thing. And I think when you look at this basket of alliances that the US is looking at to counter China, India sits in that right at the top of that basket, and I think they have a convergence of interests. The US is looking at China and seeing its aggression in Hong Kong and it's seeing the aggression in Ladakh and is worried. And so they want to contain China. So I think India is going to play a very important role. Now, will the US have a human rights
yes.
factor? Yes. I think that this government is going to be, this administration is definitely committed to human rights. There's no question. You just have to look at the people in the administration to know that that is something that they care deeply about. But I don't think they're going to call out India in a way that is going to embarrass the government in any way. Because they want to work with India. They see India as an ally. So I think this will have to be done in a more subtle way. But yeah, do I think that on a personal level, these people look at CAA and find it disturbing? And do they find what's gone on in Kashmir disturbing? I'm sure they do.
That's really interesting. Also on the trade front, the US has been tough with India. Is that likely to soften as well?
Trade has been such a difficult issue for the two countries to solve. It's been like that for such a long time. It's always been a problem. And they come at it from such different perspectives. And that is something that I don't, my honest answer, I'm going to be totally honest, I don't know. I mean, they've found so many other areas of interest where they can progress. I mean, the military has been amazing. I mean, the progress they've made. When you think of where we were,
yes,
zero cooperation to where they are today, I mean, it's like 180-degree difference. And so they've made incredible progress in those areas. Trade is just one of those niggly issues, and I think it's just going to take a lot of time to unravel that.
Also, if we look at the numbers, and it was interesting, Donald Trump made his final sort of speech. And even in that speech, he talked about how he got more votes than any other sitting president. And he very oddly said, I'll be back in some form. It was almost, it was almost theatrical. But we must acknowledge these 74 million votes that he did get, which means that it is a divided country that Joe Biden is now inheriting. What does that mean on the ground and for the administration?
Yes. So I think that the one big worry in this country, first of all, I think the country is going through a seismic shift, in its identity. And I think that right now, really, I think it's a country looking for an identity. And I think that if the shift had, and I've said this in my book actually, that the shift started taking place under Jimmy Carter. It goes back even before Reagan, the shift to the right. It's been slow, but it's really ramped up. I think if you look at the white majority now is about just over 60%. So there's been a dramatic shift. And when you think about immigration here, it just after World War II, it was like over 13%. And it dropped to 4% in the 1970s because Europe had settled down and, the Marshall Plan had taken place and there wasn't that much immigration. It's now back up at 13%. But the only difference is before, 75% of the immigrants were from Europe and eventually blended in. And now 75% of the immigrants are brown. So there's a big racial shift. And so I think that this is becoming a more multicultural country. And that is something that a lot of people are having to grapple with. And not everyone is dealing with that very well. So this 74 million people that voted for Trump, not just once, but that were willing to vote for him for another 4 years, that has been a wake-up call for everyone. And the question is, what is it that they, given COVID, we were 400,000 people who are dead in a very mismanaged sort of, maybe this is a matter of opinion, but a lot of people feel that COVID was madly mismanaged. The economy has tanked. So why would people want 4 more years of this? And so you have to ask the question, why? And a lot of people, some political scientists have done a study, and Bruce Bartels, and came up with the fact that 30% of Americans wouldn't mind some form of authoritarianism if it meant maintaining the status quo, the cultural status quo. So a bit about what sort of identity and culture you feel America should be. And there's some people that have come out and said, like Pompeo and people, I hope I'm not misquoting this, it may not be Pompeo, but some people have said that culturally they feel America should remain white, and they're having trouble with this multicultural identity. So there is a shift going on. Some of it, but the bottom of it is inequality, and there's and I think
so the Trump administration represented a sort of white America and holding on to that white America.
Yes, and I think what Trump did was rip off the sort of veneer of politeness or whatever you want to call it and put salt in the wounds and said, it's okay to be angry and it's okay to just express yourself and demand what you want. And he just pushed it right up to the front. So maybe, and that's what we have right now. And so I don't know how easy it's going to be for Biden to heal this.
Yes.
But not a real challenge in front of him. And it may be something that the politicians actually now have to deal with head on.
So, speaking of Biden attempting to heal, and he kept talking about healing the country through his campaign as well. So on one hand, he has his, Democrat supporters who are going to expect him to reverse a lot of the things that Trump did, to immediately start cleaning house, and he has begun. But will he also have to balance that out with the Republicans and their support base in order to, not perhaps widen the divisions that's already in the country?
Yeah, look, there's so much that he's going to have to deal with. When you think about one thing, that Trump has been silenced by 3 tech companies. Tech companies are determining, if the president gets to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, I have sort of mixed feelings about that. I mean, I was really relieved not to have this kind of giant migraine every morning when Trump came on and sort of spewed lies. But on the other hand, whose hands are we in, and how much power, who has all this power? And so Biden has to deal with so many different issues. Who's making the rules here? It's also unregulated right now. And I mean, you just look at India and what's happened with China, TikTok, and all that, all the sort of stuff that India's recently, right? So we are living in a new age. The new age is the technological age. So we are fighting for all kinds of things. Our future is technology. There is democracy versus the China model. There's just so many competing things right now. And I just think that, sorting all that out, Biden has his hands full, as does his team. And I'm glad he has a team that's so competent. But and here we have Kamala Harris, who represents the perfect multicultural mix.
Yes. So, I was also going to ask you about that. What sort of a difference is this going to make simply to morale among women and to women's rights and issues pertaining to women's rights, to agency over their bodies, agency over abortion laws, things that sort of came under a cloud in this last regime. Having a woman as vice president, what does that mean right now for women in the US?
It's symbolically fantastic. But in reality, look at the Supreme Court. I mean, it's a very conservative Supreme Court. So anything on abortion, etc., women's rights that comes up in front of the Supreme Court, I don't think is going to, I don't think you're going to have any liberal judgments. So, and I wouldn't look to America for any enlightened judgments on women's issues. The Supreme Court. However, I think Kamala represents the future, and she represents a lot of hope for a lot of people on many levels, on women, on multiculturalism for the country and identity. She has it's a mixed marriage, which is great. She's very progressive. And she's very big on human rights.
Absolutely. And of course, is it a given now America will return to the Paris Climate Accord, return to the WHO, all of those, sort of snap decisions are made?
I think that's already been announced. Paris Climate has already been announced. They've already said they're joining. That's I think, the done deal. And I'm sure WHO will follow.
All right. Thank you so much for spending time with us and answering our questions. I look forward to reading your book for our audience. The name of the book, I'll just tell you one more time, A Matter of Trust, India-US Relations from Truman to Trump.
I have copy here. I can actually show them what it looks like. For your...
No, I was right the first time. Yes.
I don't know how to do it. Anyway, it's not coming out properly the way I did.
So that's the book. Take a look at it. It's extremely interesting, and this would be a really interesting time to read that book, because there's all of this confusion about whether personal relationships actually call the shots, so whether all of the the foreign affairs officers who are working in the background, who remain behind the scenes from regime to regime, is that really the groundwork that they're doing? Does that really call the shots? So it's a really interesting book to read at this time. Thank you so much, Ms. Ahamed, for speaking with us. And I wish you a very good day. We understand the action is about to begin.
Yes, I know. I can't wait to go and finish seeing it. Thank you.
Have a nice day. Good luck.